Meruem, the king of the ants, the most powerful character in Hunter x Hunter at the time of recording. He is also one of the most interesting. His development over the course of the Chimera Ant arc is only matched by characters that are featured much more in the show. His development can be broken down into three main sections: before he's born and his birth, before the involvement of Komugi, and after the introduction of Komugi. In this video, we're going to go over all of this and take a deep delve into his character. But before we do, don't forget to subscribe. If you like Hunter x Hunter or just anime in general, subscribing to this channel is a no-brainer. I upload a new video every week and my repertoire of shows to talk about is constantly expanding. Currently I'm watching Tokyo Revengers and My Hero Academia. So if you're interested in either of these shows, you should definitely subscribe for future updates. Anyway, let's talk briefly about the foreshadowing of the king's birth. Up until the birth of the royal guard, we really don't have an idea of just how strong the king might be. But after Pitou's birth and encounter with Kite, we get a much better idea of how the power might scale for the king. With an immediate display of power, he quickly changes the direction of the entire arc, killing the queen as well as one of his subordinates. It's a ruthless display that shows that he doesn't care about the queen or the other ants, and that he's supposed to be the main antagonist of the arc. Meruem's visual design also helps with this, as it seems to be inspired by World War I or Vietnam-era military gear. Also, side note, can we talk about how many ants are just somehow born with clothing? Like, it's literally part of their body. Anyway, all of these things kind of bring us to the conclusion that he will be the main antagonist, and a ruthless one at that. After his birth, he goes on to end the lives of many humans, and quickly brings an entire government to its knees. We watch him get more acquainted with the royal guards, but at this point it seems like there's not that much character development. You know, he just seems hungry and bored. He's still just as ruthless as he was at the beginning of his life. Before meeting Komugi, his view of humanity is pretty one-dimensional. He basically thinks all humans are predictable and have some patterns within them, and that these patterns can all be easily exploited. But then comes Komugi, and everything changes. These changes start when the king realizes that Komugi is not a regular opponent. Even compared to the other top players that he's faced, she's miles ahead of them in her game. As he continues to lose, the king becomes frustrated, not with his losses, but by the fact that he's still enjoying it despite losing. He doesn't understand why he finds enjoyment in losing, and it leads to one of the most important scenes in the arc. The scene in which Meruem removes his own arm is where we see the development of one of his most central characteristics, his fairness. While pulling off his own arm was supposed to be a tactic to mess up Komugi's rhythm, it's also one of the few times we see him not in control of a situation. It's an extremely tense scene, but it's really the first one we see some major development in Meruem. His way of thinking at the beginning of the scene is different from his way of thinking at the end. It is also around this time that he expresses to the guards that he has no name, and that he is just the king. This is another piece of his personality that's introduced by Komugi, and it becomes a struggle of individualism for him, not like a major one. But it's definitely something in the back of his mind up until the fight with Neferpitou. But we can't talk about that fight yet. We'll get there in a second. I think the next major event for Meruem's development is the bird attack. This is the first scene that we see he really cares about Komugi. Just his reaction of killing the bird is enough to see that. But when he's confronted to new, unfamiliar emotions, that's when it's clear a connection has formed between the two. And it's a connection that will affect Meruem's character until his death. There's also a tenderness in this scene that we see from Meruem that we don't see again until the invasion. During the attack, we see the same tender and caring side of Meruem. It becomes very clear that Komugi is important to the King of the Ants, something that even the show considers unusual. It is clear at this point that Meruem's view of humans has changed, or at least his view of Komugi. And this is something that he voices in his conversation with Neferpitou before their fight. He understands that power is not meant to be wielded with fear, but it's meant to be wielded to protect the weak. This is a pretty major development when you compare it to how he was behaving at his birth, tormenting lower Chimera Ants, as well as ending the lives of, well, you know. In fact, he doesn't even want to fight Netero. He would rather discuss the role of humans after he takes over. He can see the blatant issues with humanity, and wishes to fix them. Of course, the methods he wants to use to do this probably won't go over well with the rest of the world. But regardless of that, his feelings towards the human race have definitely changed, and they change even more drastically after the fight with Netero, as Meruem decides that humans will no longer be used for the procreation of the ants, and that they will get their own space in the world to live. This obviously is not ideal for the human race, but compared to his view of humans at his introduction, Meruem has come a long way. He has an understanding of their individualism and ego, and even finds himself admiring a few of them. Of course, pretty much all of this progress is lost when he loses his memory. He is still somewhat merciful towards the royal guards and ants in general, but it's clear that he cares much less about the human race than he did after his conversation with Netero, which is pretty understandable. I'm just saying that, like, if I was in his shoes and someone dropped a nuke on me, I don't think I'd be very fond of them either. Anyway, after he plays his little game with Shaiapouf, and he regains his memories of Komugi, he feels even more human than he felt before. At this point, he also knows that his life is close to being over, and that he wishes to spend his dying moments with her. He's willing to do anything to be with her. The scene where he kneels before Palm is one of the most symbolic in the arc. An omnipotent king kneeling before a subordinate in an act of desperation. For so much of his life he has demanded respect, and he is willing to give up that dignity and honor just to see Komugi one last time. It shows us that he knows his life is near its end, and he's desperate to spend it with the one he cares about most. This desperation is completely different from anything we've seen from him thus far. When he meets with Komugi once again, he believes he finally understands what makes life worth living. Both of them are at peace with the inevitable outcome of their games. As the duo enter the twilight of their life, it is clear that Meruem does not want to die. Not because he still has some ambitions for ruling the world, but because he does not wish to part from Komugi. When he asks where she is, repetitively, he sounds scared and almost childlike. It has a delicateness that is unknown to him up to this point. Despite the obvious fear in his voice, he is still at peace with the result. He has accepted his death and can die in tranquility with the person he cares most about. Overall, Meruem develops into one of the most interesting and deep characters in Hunter x Hunter, if not anime in general. He basically takes a complete 180, but it's done in a way that is believable and understandable. Nothing that he does feels out of character, despite how different his actions are at the beginning of his introduction and at his death. Despite being the main antagonist, he is undoubtedly one of the most relatable characters by the end. It's hard to say whether he is more ant or more human at the end, as it becomes more and more ambiguous which is truly more sinister. But that is a topic for another day. Thank you all for watching, and if you made it all the way to the end, I would greatly appreciate it if you would subscribe. I'm trying to hit 100 subscribers by the end of the year, so every single one counts. Thank you again, and I'll see you next week.